A few years back, something truly strange happened between me and my best friend, an incident that's still etched into my memory like a scar. I was 15 at the time. One night, I decided to crash at my friend's place after a long evening of watching horror movies. We had scared ourselves silly with ghost stories and eerie films, but instead of winding down, we found ourselves craving something even more thrilling, something real. Not too far from where my friend lived, there was a run-down block of abandoned houses, long forgotten by the neighborhood. They had been condemned for years, and the local government was scheduled to tear them down the day after tomorrow to make way for new developments. The entire site was fenced off, plastered with warning signs that screamed, "Do not enter," in large weathered letters. The air around that place always felt off, thick, heavy with something unseen. Every single house in the block had been sealed shut, windows and doors barricaded by thick wooden planks nailed tightly into rotting frames. No one was supposed to get in. No one could get in. But that night, we decided to do something reckless. My friend knew of a small gap in the fence, hidden behind some bushes where we could sneak through. With our digital camera in hand and our nerves buzzing with excitement, we made our way toward the condemned houses. As we stepped past the fence, the air grew colder. The silence of the area pressed against our eardrums, so complete that even our footsteps on cracked pavement felt deafening. The homes loomed above us like skeletons of a past life, their decaying facades whispering secrets we weren't meant to hear. We walked around, taking random photos of the houses, snapping pictures of shattered windows, broken porch lights, and the twisted remnants of forgotten lives. But every house we approached was sealed up tight. We couldn't find a single way inside. Then we noticed something odd. One of the houses, about midway down the block, had a second-floor window that wasn't completely boarded. The planks were there, but they were crooked, uneven, like someone had tried to seal it in a hurry. From where we stood, we could see straight into the upper room through a narrow opening. Just out of curiosity, we raised the camera and snapped a photo of that exposed window. We didn't think much of it at the time. After another round of shots, we climbed back out through the fence and made our way home, talking about everything and nothing, laughing to shake off the unease that clung to us like cold sweat. Later that night, sitting under the dim glow of my friend's bedroom lamp, we decided to scroll through the photos we had taken. Most were exactly what we expected, grainy shots of broken-down homes and forgotten rooms. But then we came across that photo, the one of the second-floor window. We both went silent. Inside the frame of that crooked window was the figure of a woman. She was standing there, still as death, staring straight out as if she had been watching us all along. She wore a brown raincoat, old and damp-looking, the fabric clinging to her pale frame like it didn't quite belong to her. Her skin was a stark, unnatural white, too white, like wax left too long in the cold. Her hair was long and black, hanging past her shoulders in damp, stringy strands that covered part of her face. But it was her expression that chilled us to the core. She looked devastated, not angry, not scared, just crushingly sad, like her sorrow reached so deep it had no bottom. Her eyes looked hollow, as if whatever had once lived behind them had long since rotted away. We both stared at the screen in disbelief. There had been no one there when we took the photo. We were sure of it. We had looked up at that window ourselves. We would have seen her. And even if someone had been inside, it would have been impossible. That house, just like the others, was completely sealed off. No one could have gotten in. Shaken, we decided to go back. We had to be sure. Armed with flashlights and adrenaline, we returned to the old block. The air felt even colder this time, like the neighborhood had been holding its breath since we left. We reached the house and examined it more closely. The door was still boarded. Every window, especially the one on the second floor, was sealed from the outside with thick, rusted nails. There was no gap wide enough for a person to squeeze through. No sign that anyone had been inside. No broken boards, no footprints in the dust below. And yet, the woman in the photograph had been real. She had to be. But she was gone. And the room beyond that crooked window stood silent and empty, just like it always had been. Or so it wanted us to believe. This isn't my story. It's something that happened to a close friend of mine from Japan. For the sake of privacy, I'll call him Rita. It all started when Rita was around 11 or 12 years old. He was, admittedly, a good-looking kid, and as such, he drew a lot of attention, even from people much older than him. But there was one girl in particular, one who stood out for all the wrong reasons. Her name was Ayano. She was 17 at the time, much older, and lived just a few doors down from Rita. They weren't close, barely even acquaintances. At first, she was just another face in the neighborhood, someone he might pass on the way home from school. But then, things changed. She began following him. At first, it was subtle, watching from across the street or always seeming to appear when he walked to the store. But soon, it became constant. Every day, every night. Whether in person or online, she always seemed to be there. At first, her messages came through social media, harmless enough on the surface. "Be safe," she'd write. "Sleep well. Are you okay today?" Rita thought it was a little strange, but brushed it off. Maybe she was just being nice. Maybe she was just lonely. But then, the messages began piling up. 20 a day, 30, more. They got personal. Too personal. If he skipped lunch at school, she'd text, "You should eat your lunch today." If his little sister was crying in the other room, a message would pop up, "I think your sister is hungry." That's when he felt the chill. There was no way she could have known those things, unless she was watching, unless she was always watching. Rita shut off everything after that, social media, his phone, all of it. But that didn't stop her. His mother was almost never home, constantly working long hours, so Rita and his siblings were often left in the care of babysitters. One day, a new sitter showed up. It was Ayano. She acted completely normal, smiling, polite. She played with the kids, helped around the house, even brought snacks. But what unnerved Rita the most wasn't how she treated him. It was how quickly she grew close to his mother. Too close. Then, one day at school, Ayano approached Rita with something that would change everything. She said his mother had taken an unexpected trip abroad, gone for a week, and that she had asked Ayano to let him stay at her house in the meantime. At first, Rita hesitated. The idea felt wrong. But Ayano was calm, confident, even reassuring. She said his mother had already left. There was no way to call, no one else to turn to. So, reluctantly, he went with her. When they got to her house, the place was eerily quiet. Her parents weren't home. She said they were working late. Rita nodded, but something inside him stirred, an uneasiness that settled low in his chest. That first night passed in a blur, but what followed only grew stranger. Ayano began playing weird games with him, games that made his skin crawl. She'd insist they play family, calling herself the wife and forcing Rita to play the husband. She made him sit with her for hours playing cops and robbers, where he was always the one blindfolded and locked in a room, left alone in silence, sometimes for so long he couldn't tell if it was day or night. Every attempt to leave was blocked, doors locked from the outside, windows too high to reach. She always held the keys, always smiling. By the 5th day, Ayano had to go to her part-time job. She left him alone, as usual, doors bolted shut, no way out. He sat in front of the TV, trying to distract himself, when the screen cut to a local news bulletin. A missing child alert. His name, his face, it was him. He stared, stunned, the words melting into static as his heart pounded in his chest. Just as he leaned forward to read the contact number flashing on screen, the screen went black. Click. Ayano stood behind him, remote in hand. She was smiling. That same sickly sweet, dead-eyed smile. Something in Rita snapped. He screamed, he cried, he begged. Ayano stepped forward to calm him, arms outstretched, but he tore away, pushing past her, scrambling to the nearest window. Somehow, by sheer panic and adrenaline, he managed to force it open just enough to wedge himself halfway out. And he screamed for help with every bit of air in his lungs. By some miracle, a couple was passing by at that exact moment. They stopped, looked up, saw him, and they called the police. Within an hour, officers had forced their way into the house. They found Rita locked in a bedroom, hands tied, blindfold still in place, shaking like a leaf. He remembers very little of what happened next, only flashes, Ayano being taken away in handcuffs, his mother crying, holding him like she would never let go. After that, everything changed. Rita moved to Australia not long after. He never saw Ayano again, never asked what happened to her. But even now, years later, just hearing her name makes him flinch. About 5 years ago, I was living downtown in a major US city. I've always been a night person. Something about the quiet and solitude just suited me. My roommate, though, was the exact opposite. Early to bed, early to rise. So most nights, after he turned in, I was left wide awake, alone, and bored. To kill time, I started taking long walks. At first, it was just to stretch my legs, but it became a ritual, wandering through the streets, thinking, observing. For 4 years I did this. 4 years of midnight strolls through empty streets, dimly lit alleys, and quiet neighborhoods. Not once did I ever feel unsafe. I used to joke that even the drug dealers were polite in that city. But everything changed one night. It was a Wednesday. Somewhere between 1 and 2 a.m., I was taking my usual route near a park that was patrolled by police. It was quite a distance from my apartment, but familiar enough that I didn't think twice. The night was quiet, unnaturally so. Even for a weeknight, the streets were unusually still. Barely any cars, no footsteps, no voices. The park, as expected, was completely empty. I turned down a short side street, intending to loop back toward my building, and that's when I noticed him. At the far end of the street, a figure was approaching on my side of the sidewalk. At first, all I saw was the silhouette, a man, tall and lean, dancing. It was bizarre. His movements were strange and fluid, something like a slow waltz, but there was a pattern. He would twist, glide, and with each box step end in a sharp, deliberate stride forward. It was as if he were dance-walking directly toward me. Assuming he was probably drunk, I stepped to the very edge of the sidewalk, giving him space to pass. But the closer he came, the more unnatural it all seemed. He moved with eerie grace, smooth and purposeful, like every muscle had been trained for this performance. He wore an old-fashioned suit, the kind you might find in a thrift store or a forgotten closet. When he was close enough, I saw his face. His eyes were wide, unblinking, and his head was tilted slightly back, as if staring beyond the rooftops, gazing up into the night sky. But it was his mouth that chilled me the most. A painfully wide smile stretched into a cartoonish grin that didn't touch his eyes. Something was wrong with this man. Terribly wrong. Without thinking, I crossed the street. I couldn't stand being that close to him. For just a second, I glanced away to watch my footing. When I reached the other side and looked back, he had stopped. He wasn't dancing anymore. He was just standing there. One foot placed into the street, his body frozen mid-stride. He faced me, but his gaze still pointed toward the sky. That same grotesque smile frozen on his face. Something inside me screamed, "Run!" But I didn't. I just started walking, quickly, eyes locked on him. He didn't move, not even an inch. When I was about half a block away, I turned my eyes forward just for a moment to check the sidewalk ahead of me. Still empty. But when I looked back, he was gone. I blinked, my heart skipped. A flicker of relief passed through me, but then I spotted him. He had crossed the street. He was crouched low, partially hidden in shadow. The posture was wrong, like a marionette caught in mid-collapse. I couldn't see clearly, but I knew he was facing me. And I had only looked away for maybe 10 seconds. He had moved fast. I stood there, frozen, just staring at him. And then he started moving toward me again. Not walking, not dancing. He tiptoed, exaggeratedly, like a cartoon villain sneaking up on someone. Each step deliberate, lifted high, then placed softly. But he was fast, far too fast. I wanted to run, wanted to scream, wanted to do anything, grab my phone, spray him with something, make noise, make him stop. But I couldn't move. He kept coming and then stopped again, just one car length away from me. Still smiling, still staring skyward, still completely silent. That smile was unbearable, stretched too wide, as if his skin might tear. Finally, I found my voice. I meant to shout something forceful, something to scare him off. But what came out was barely a whisper, trembling and weak. What the fuck? I heard the fear in my own voice. Thin, fragile, useless. And he heard it too, I'm sure, because anyone could. But he didn't flinch, didn't react. He just stood there, grinning at the stars. And then, slowly, deliberately, he turned around and began to dance walk away. The same fluid motions, the same twisted grace. I didn't dare move. I just watched him shrink into the distance, step by step. He was almost out of sight. Then I realized he had stopped. He wasn't dancing anymore. He wasn't walking away. He was coming back. This time, he was running, full speed. No tiptoes, no rhythm, just sprinting. I turned and bolted, legs burning, heart in my throat. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I could feel him behind me. The rhythmless pounding of feet on pavement echoed through the empty street. I didn't stop until I reached a well-lit road with sparse traffic. I looked back. Nothing. The street behind me was empty. I didn't see him again that night, or ever again. But for the rest of my time in that city, 6 more months, I never took another nighttime walk. There was something about his face that haunted me. He wasn't drunk, he wasn't high, he wasn't even human in the way people are supposed to be. He looked completely and utterly insane. And that is a terrifying thing to meet in the middle of the night. Back in the mid-80s, my mom worked as a cleaner in Australia. She ran her own small business, mostly cleaning homes in suburban neighborhoods, but occasionally she took jobs out in the rural areas, sometimes even in the quiet, eerie wine regions. She got most of her work the old-fashioned way, by leaving business cards at corner stores and local bulletin boards. A good portion of her clientele came from word of mouth, small-town referrals, and neighbors spreading her name. She never had trouble finding work. People liked her, and she was good at what she did. But there was one job she'll never forget. One day, she got a call from a woman who sounded like she was in her 60s. The lady asked if my mom could clean her old farmhouse out in a more remote area far from town. Right away, something felt off. The woman made a handful of strange requests. For one, she absolutely refused to meet in person. My mom usually insisted on meeting clients before starting a job, just to get a feel for the place and the people. But the woman was adamant. She told my mom the keys would be left under the front doormat and that she wouldn't be there during the cleaning. My mom hesitated until the woman mentioned the payment. She offered to pay well above the usual rate, substantially more, enough to make my mom pause and, against her better judgment, agree. It was a Monday morning when she arrived at the property. The drive itself made her stomach twist. The house sat at the end of a long gravel driveway that seemed to stretch forever. Fields of nothing surrounded her. No neighboring homes, no fences, no animals. Just flat, dry land and the occasional gnarled tree. When the house finally came into view, it looked more like a painting than a home. A weather-beaten farmhouse, isolated in the middle of all that empty land. There were no signs of life, no other cars, no footprints, no birds, just silence. She found the keys exactly where the woman said they'd be. With a deep breath, she stepped inside and began to clean. It started off like any other job, but an hour in, everything changed. She was in the kitchen when she heard it, the unmistakable click and slam of a door closing. The back door. Her heart froze. She had been told, promised, that no one would be home. She was alone, or she was supposed to be. She stood completely still, clutching the edge of the counter, waiting, listening. For what she swore felt like 3 or 4 full minutes, she didn't hear a single sound. But every second felt stretched thin with tension. The house didn't creak, the wind didn't blow. It was too quiet. There was no other car outside, no rustle of movement, no footsteps, just dread. She wanted to leave, desperately, but there were only 2 rooms left to clean, both bedrooms. She told herself it was probably nothing, maybe a draft, maybe the house had shifted and caused the door to close, maybe something fell, that was all. Trying to shake the fear crawling up her spine, she made her way down the hallway. The first bedroom seemed normal enough. Then she entered the second room. That's when everything turned. All over the bed were photographs, dozens of them, laid out carefully, black and white, some old, some newer, and they were all of her. Not the woman who owned the house. Her, my mother. She stepped closer, staring in disbelief. Some photos were taken from outside our family home. Others were clearly shot at houses she'd cleaned, taken from outside windows, through glass or over fences. All different locations, different days, different times, but all of her. She backed away from the bed, breathing hard, trying not to scream. She found the house phone on a hallway table and called the police immediately. Then, without looking back, she ran, drove straight down that long driveway and didn't stop until she hit the main road. The police came, investigated, interviewed the woman who owned the house. She claimed it was a break-in, said she had no idea about the photos, no idea anyone had been in the house, just as surprised as anyone. But something never sat right. There were too many photos, too many locations. Someone had been following my mom for weeks, maybe months. The police looked into it. For a while, they stayed in touch, but eventually the updates stopped coming. The investigation cooled. No one was charged. We moved to a new town 4 months later. My mom never worked in remote areas again, and she never, ever entered another house without meeting the owner first. I'm 22 now, but this happened about 1.5 years ago, back when I had just moved into my very first apartment. It was a small place, nothing fancy, but it was mine, and I was still in the process of moving in. The kind of transitional chaos where you've got half your life in boxes and everything feels unfamiliar. The front door to the apartment locked automatically whenever it closed. That was something I noticed right away, a feature meant for safety, but something that would soon feel far more sinister. That day, I had just gone downstairs to grab my mail from the front entrance of the complex. I had my phone to my ear, chatting casually with a friend. Nothing felt strange, just an ordinary afternoon. I made my way back up to the apartment, let the door shut behind me, and sat on the edge of my bed. With the phone still pressed to my ear, I started sifting through the mail, mostly bills and junk. That's when I dropped the phone. It slid off the bed and disappeared under it. I groaned, got down on my hands and knees, and stretched my arm underneath to grab it. But then, I saw something that didn't make sense. At first, my brain didn't register it. It was just a shape, dark and still. But the longer I stared, the more horrifyingly clear it became. There was someone under my bed. My breath caught in my throat. I went completely still. He was lying on his side, back toward me, curled slightly, his head resting low, tucked toward his chest, so I couldn't see his face. And thank God he couldn't see mine. I felt like I was outside my body. My heart pounded so hard it rang in my ears, but I forced myself to stay calm. Think, I told myself, think fast. I picked up the phone and said as steadily as I could, "Sorry, I dropped my phone. I'm gonna take a shower and call you back." The bathroom was just a few feet from the bed. I walked toward it, slowly, trying to keep my movements casual. I stepped inside, turned the knob, and locked the door with trembling hands. Then I turned on the shower to muffle the noise and climbed out the bathroom window. I bolted, barefoot, across the grass and around to the front of the complex. Once I was safely out of sight, I ducked behind a parked car across the street, still in shock, and called the police. It was still summer, and the sun hadn't set yet. Everything looked warm and harmless, like it couldn't possibly be hiding the horror I had just escaped from. The dispatcher told me to stay put, but to keep an eye on the building, specifically to watch the entrance door and my bathroom window. I crouched there, knees shaking, phone clutched tight, eyes fixed on my apartment like it might suddenly collapse into a nightmare. I also called my friend back. He rushed over and got there just before the police did. When the officers arrived, I handed them my keys and pointed them toward the unit. They disappeared inside while I stayed frozen behind the car, barely breathing. Only a minute or two passed before they came back out, dragging someone between them. It was a man, thin, pale, worn down like he hadn't slept in days. His clothes hung loosely on his frame. His eyes, they were wild, vacant, yet intense. But he didn't fight, didn't scream, didn't even try to run. He just stood there. The officer who had stayed beside me put a hand gently on my shoulder. He looked me in the eye and said, "You did the right thing. Don't blame yourself." Then he told me the part I'll never forget. That man had been standing outside the locked bathroom door, holding one of my own kitchen knives. He had been waiting for me. Somehow, while I had gone to get my mail, he had slipped inside. The door had shut behind him, and without a sound, he had crawled under my bed, waiting, watching, for God knows how long. It turns out he was homeless, mentally unstable. They didn't charge him, just placed him in a psychiatric facility. But to this day, I don't sleep in complete darkness, and I never drop to the floor without checking under the bed first. When I was 21, my girlfriend and I decided to spend a weekend up at my family's old vacation mobile home. It was deep in the woods, nothing around for miles but trees and snow, the kind of place where silence hums in your ears and shadows move if you stare long enough. That night, there was a heavy snowstorm. We were curled up together on the worn couch right next to the heater, half watching some late-night TV. The mobile home creaked with age, the kind of structure that groaned with every gust of wind. Still, it felt cozy, isolated, but safe, at least on the inside. But outside, there was nothing. Just dark woods in every direction, and the only thing separating us from that emptiness was a flimsy wooden door with a broken lock. The last time my grandparents had visited, my grandpa had wedged a couple of concrete cinder blocks in front of the door as a makeshift barrier. The door opened inward, so it was more about peace of mind than real security. That night, it didn't feel like enough. We were watching something forgettable on TV when my girlfriend suddenly grabbed my arm. Her voice was quiet but firm. "Did you hear that?" I paused, listening, but heard nothing beyond the whine of the wind and the low hum of the heater. I brushed it off, told her it was probably just the storm, or maybe a deer, or even a bear. Nothing unusual for the area. But 5 minutes later, she looked at me again, more serious this time. I was about to reassure her again when I heard it too. It was faint, but deliberate. The sound of someone, or something, messing with the small lawnmower shed out back. I muted the TV. The sound continued. Metal rattling, a faint clatter, like someone was searching through tools or pushing something over. My car was parked right outside, and every light in the mobile home was on. If someone was out there, they knew we were inside. My girlfriend whispered, "You should go check." I looked at her like she was crazy. "Go outside now?" She didn't argue. Neither of us wanted to say it, but we both knew this wasn't normal. The sound eventually stopped. The storm returned as the only thing we could hear, wind battering the sides of the mobile home and snow tapping at the windows like fingers. After a few more minutes passed in silence, I cautiously stood up. I turned off the interior lights to kill the glare, then slowly opened the front blinds just a crack. Pitch black. Nothing. I flipped on the porch light and looked again. There, etched in the untouched snow of the front yard, were footprints. Not animal prints. Shoes. Human. Fresh. They led away from the shed and curved around toward the backyard. I felt my stomach drop. I crept down the narrow hallway and approached the rear window. My hand hesitated on the curtain. I told myself there wouldn't be anything there. that this would just be more snow, maybe even less than I thought. But when I pulled the curtain aside, my girlfriend screamed. I didn't, but I wanted to. There, just beyond the window, stood a man. He was dressed head to toe in black. No snow on him, no movement, just still. He wore a vendetta mask, white, expressionless, grinning, and he was facing the window, watching us. No lights were on in the backyard. He must have seen us only because of the interior light, but somehow we could see him clear as day. I shut the blinds in one sharp motion and turned to my girlfriend. "Go," I said, voice low and shaking. "Get in the bedroom." She didn't argue. I went straight for the closet, found my grandfather's hunting rifle, something he always left there just in case, and loaded it with trembling hands. Then I grabbed every heavy object I could find. I pushed the cinder blocks harder against the door, dragged a dresser, a table, anything with weight, and barricaded us inside. I shut every blind, turned off every light. We sat in the corner of the bedroom, backs against the wall, gun in my hands, barely breathing. That's when it came. A bang at the front door. Not a knock, not a jiggle of the handle, just a single, deliberate impact. Another bang, and another. I don't think he even tried the doorknob. Maybe he knew it didn't matter. Maybe he didn't care. I held the gun tighter, heart hammering against my ribs. My girlfriend clung to me. I don't remember how long the banging lasted, 10 seconds, a minute, but eventually it stopped. Silence, complete and total. He never got inside. I stayed awake the rest of the night, the rifle across my lap. My girlfriend eventually fell asleep, but I couldn't close my eyes, not even once. Every sound made me jump, every creak was him. We left the next morning as soon as there was light in the sky. Packed everything, didn't even eat, just got in the car and drove. I didn't look back. But as I was pulling away, I noticed something in the snow. A new set of footprints, fresh, leading from just beneath the front window, out into the woods. He had stood there, watching us after everything, just watching. We haven't gone back since. My grandparents still visit from time to time, and they say there's never been any sign of a break-in, nothing stolen, nothing damaged. But I don't care. I'm never going back up there, ever. Back when my grandmother was still alive, I used to walk down the block to her house almost every day. I'd help out with little chores, watering her garden, changing light bulbs, lifting things that were too heavy for her. It was part of our routine, and I loved it. She was a cautious woman, paranoid, some might say. Her doors were always locked, windows too. She double-checked everything before going to bed each night. So when I walked over one afternoon, at my usual time, and found her front door unlocked, I immediately felt something was wrong. Still, I let myself in, calling out softly, "Grandma?" The house was quiet at first, until I heard faint noises coming from upstairs, drawers opening, cabinet doors closing. I looked up and saw her bedroom door slightly ajar, shadows moving behind it. Relieved, I called out again, "Grandma?" I began climbing the stairs, expecting to see her standing by her dresser like always, maybe looking for something she misplaced. But just as I got about 5 feet from the door, slam! She slammed the bedroom door shut, hard. Startled, I knocked gently on the door. "Everything okay?" And then my phone rang. I pulled it out and froze when I saw the caller ID. Grandma. Confused, I slowly answered. Her voice came through, calm and cheerful. "Don't come over today, sweetheart," she said. "I'm heading out to my seniors club. I'll be home later." My blood turned to ice. She wasn't home. She was nowhere near here. I couldn't even speak. I just stared at the door in front of me, the door that had just slammed shut with someone inside. I ended the call, still silent, trying to keep my breathing even. Then I called out, acting casual, "Okay, Grandma, I'll just wait downstairs." I turned and made my way down the stairs as calmly as I could manage, every hair on my body standing up, every muscle tense with fear. I walked straight to the kitchen, opened the drawer, and pulled out the biggest knife I could find. With my other hand, I dialed 911. The operator answered, and I whispered what was happening, that someone was in my grandmother's house, in her bedroom, pretending to be her. Minutes later, red and blue lights lit up the front windows. The officers burst in. I pointed them upstairs, and they moved quickly, weapons drawn. I backed against the wall, gripping the kitchen counter, heart pounding in my ears. Then, bang! The crack of a gunshot echoed through the house. I flinched so hard the knife slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor. A few moments later, the paramedics arrived. They wheeled out the man on a stretcher. He was still alive, but bleeding badly. And when I saw his face, my heart dropped again. It was my grandmother's next-door neighbor. He'd always seemed a little odd, friendly enough, always said hello, but never the type to raise concern. Apparently, he'd seen my grandma leave that afternoon, knew she lived alone, figured it was his chance. He broke in, hoping to find jewelry or money, but when he heard me calling from the stairs, he panicked, grabbed a knife, and waited just behind the door, ready to attack whoever walked in. If I hadn't gotten that call from my grandma, if she'd been even 2 minutes later, I would have opened that door, and I wouldn't have walked back out. This is, without question, the most haunting memory of my life. My wife and I had just come back from a quiet dinner out, nothing out of the ordinary. We pulled into the driveway, stepped out of the car, and froze. Our front door was wide open, just standing there, unlocked, slightly swaying. We looked at each other, and my wife's hand instinctively reached for mine. I told her to wait by the car. "Do not come inside," I said. "Stay where you are." I bolted for the house. I didn't stop to look around. I ran straight up the stairs to our bedroom. Inside the closet, behind some old boxes, was my shotgun. I loaded it with shaking hands, heart hammering in my chest, then began moving through the house methodically, every sense on high alert. Upstairs, empty. Nothing out of place, nothing missing. I crept back down the stairs, sweeping the main floor. The kitchen, the living room, office. Still nothing. Then came the basement. My finger hovered near the trigger as I stepped into the dim concrete space, breath shallow. But again, nothing. No noise, no sign of movement, no sign that anyone had been there at all. Eventually, I called the police. They arrived quickly, listened carefully, then began their own search, first upstairs, then the main floor, then the basement. They checked everything I did, and more. But in the end, they turned up nothing. Not a single item moved, no signs of forced entry, no fingerprints, nothing broken, no muddy footprints, no scuff marks. It was like the door had opened itself. They asked us repeatedly if we were sure we had locked the door when we left. I wasn't. I thought I had, but doubt crept in. Memories tricky like that. My wife, on the other hand, was certain. She was adamant. She had watched me lock the door. She remembered it clearly. She was sure. The police concluded that if anyone had broken in, they had likely left quickly, possibly spooked. There was no burglary, no threat left behind. Or so they said. But my wife was shaken. I'd never seen her like that, pale, eyes darting toward every corner of the room like shadows were moving. She was crying, scared to stay in the house. I held her close, told her it was okay, that whoever had come in was long gone, that the worst was over. Eventually, the officers left. The house was quiet. I double-checked every door and window, pushed a chair under the doorknob just in case. Then we climbed into bed. I tried to sleep, but I couldn't stop replaying the night in my head. And just as I started to drift off, she screamed. My wife's cry cut through the silence like a blade. I shot upright, heart instantly pounding again, hands trembling. She was sitting up in bed, pointing. Her eyes were locked on the closet. My blood ran cold. In that exact moment, it hit me. I had forgotten to check the second closet, the smaller one, the one in the corner of the room we barely used, the one that always stayed closed. I turned my head, and I saw him. Just for a second, maybe less. A man, pale face, wide eyes, peeking out from the crack in the door before quickly pulling it shut again. I don't remember how I moved so fast. Within 5 seconds, the shotgun was in my hands, loaded and cocked. The unmistakable sound of the pump echoed through the house. I screamed, "Come out, now!" Silence. And then movement. The closet door swung open. But the man didn't freeze, didn't beg, didn't speak. He ran, bolted straight through the bedroom, down the stairs, and straight for the front door. I could have pulled the trigger. My finger was on it. But I didn't. I froze. He burst through the door and vanished into the night. No mask, no gloves, no stolen goods. Just gone. The police never found him. No fingerprints, no face recognition, no trail to follow. It was like he'd been a shadow all along. But I know what I saw, and I know what could have happened. If we'd gone to bed an hour earlier, if my wife hadn't woken up, if I hadn't had that gun, he wasn't there to rob us. I don't think he was there for anything but us. And though he walked away that night, I believe that gun, just the sound of it, saved us from something far, far worse. About a year ago, when I was still living at my parents' house, I started experiencing some strange things, specifically in my bedroom. At first, it was just a quiet unease, small things, easy to brush off. It started late one night while I was lying in bed, wide awake, staring up at the ceiling. The house was silent, the kind of silence that hums in your ears. I wasn't tired, just lost in thought, when suddenly I heard it. A creaking sound. It came from across the room. I sat up slowly, squinting in the dark, and saw it. My closet door. Open. Just a crack, but wide enough to be unmistakable. I was sure I had closed it. Positive. Still, I got up, heart ticking faster than it should have been, and without thinking, almost instinctively, I looked inside the closet. Nothing. Of course, there was no one there. I was 26 years old, checking my closet like a scared kid. I shut the door and told myself to relax. But that wasn't the end of it. Later that same night, I started hearing rattling sounds. They came from above, from inside the air ducts or the attic crawl space just above my ceiling. It was a low, irregular, almost rumbling noise. Not like the house settling, not like pipes. Something else. It stopped after a few minutes. I remember lying in the dark, listening, waiting. But when it went quiet, I let it go and eventually fell asleep. The next morning, I told my dad about it, about the sounds in the attic. He barely reacted, a shrug. Maybe he thought I was just being dramatic. Maybe he wasn't listening. That night, I found myself awake again. Same time, same silence. And again, creak. The closet door opening. This time, something felt wrong. The fear hit me before I even sat up. The door had been closed, fully latched. I had made sure of it. Positive. It wasn't loose. You had to turn the knob to get it open. I sat frozen in bed, watching it drift open inch by inch. I got up and checked again. The closet was empty, as always. It was a small space. There wasn't anywhere to hide. I told myself it had to be something mechanical, a broken latch or faulty hinge. That made sense, right? The rattling started again later that night, the same as before, same strange shuffling noise in the ceiling. And again, it stopped just as quickly as it started. In the morning, I pushed harder. I convinced my dad to take a proper look at the closet door. He humored me, closed it tight, pulled on it a few times, and just shook his head. "It's fine," he said. "You probably didn't shut it all the way." But I knew I had, and the way he brushed it off only made it worse. That night, I didn't even try to sleep. I stayed upright in bed, back against the wall, just watching, waiting. And sure enough, creak. The closet door opened. Like it was on cue. I stared at it for what felt like hours, waiting for the sounds above to begin. But this time, there was only silence. Something about the quiet made it worse. The air felt heavier, thicker, charged. I turned on the lamp beside my bed and slowly looked up at the air vent. And that's when I screamed. There, behind the slats of the vent, I saw eyes. 2 eyes, wide open, staring straight at me. They didn't blink, didn't move. They were just there, frozen, watching. My scream brought my parents running. They burst into the room, demanding to know what was going on, what was wrong. I tried to explain, voice shaking, hand pointing at the vent, but by the time they looked, nothing. Just a vent. They exchanged glances like I had completely lost my mind. They dismissed it as a dream, said I was overtired, paranoid, maybe even hallucinating from lack of sleep. They didn't see what I saw. They didn't feel what I felt. They even gave me a lecture about staying up too late. But I know the truth. I wasn't dreaming. I wasn't imagining anything. That door creaked open on its own, repeatedly. And those eyes in the vent, they were real. I'll never forget the way they looked at me. I've never been a believer in the paranormal, but to this day, I still don't have another explanation, and that terrifies me more than anything. I live in the Poconos with my wife and 2 kids. There's a small lake about a quarter-mile behind our house, a calm, quiet spot that feels like a private beach nestled in the woods. Up until last week, it was one of our favorite places. I'd take the kids down there to swim, build sand castles, skip rocks. It was peaceful, simple. Now, I'll never let them near that water again. I haven't told anyone, not my wife, not my friends. I'm afraid of how it'll sound, afraid they'll think I've lost it. But I know what I saw. It happened last Saturday. We spent the afternoon at the lake like we always do. We brought our chairs, snacks, towels. The kids, 6 and 8, ran straight for the water, laughing and splashing, while my wife and I sat back in the sand, soaking in the sun. They're still young, so I always remind them, don't go too deep. They usually listen. That day, we were out there for almost 2 hours. My wife eventually said she was getting tired and decided to head back to the house. I told her I'd stay a bit longer. The kids were still full of energy, building little sand forts and wading waist deep into the lake. The sun was starting to dip low behind the trees when I began to get tired myself. I noticed the kids were venturing out farther than I liked. I called to them, but they didn't respond. Laughter carried over the water, but no acknowledgement. I stood up and walked closer to the shoreline, ready to yell again. That's when I saw it. Something in the water. A shape, round, black, smooth, maybe the size of a basketball. It was moving, gliding just beneath the surface, and it was heading directly toward my kids. I didn't stop to think. I ran into the water, shouting louder this time, "Get out! Come back now!" And the urgency in my voice must have finally cut through their laughter. They turned toward me, confused. I grabbed them as soon as they were within reach and dragged them out of the lake. Heart pounding, I turned back toward the water, ready to confront whatever it was. But the object was gone. Just gone. The surface of the lake was calm again, smooth as glass, like nothing had ever been there. My kids were wide-eyed and asking questions. "What's wrong, Dad? What was that?" I didn't know what to say. I didn't even know how to begin. So I told them it was time to go home. We packed everything up and made the quiet walk back to the house. But I couldn't shake the feeling. I couldn't stop thinking about it. What I had just seen, how it moved, and why it vanished so quickly. By the time we got home, dinner was already on the table. I sat down, but I barely touched my food. My thoughts were stuck at that lake. My wife noticed right away. "What's wrong?" she asked. I looked at her and opened my mouth to speak, but the words didn't come. I didn't want to scare her, or worse, sound insane. So I just said I was tired and left it at that. After dinner, I grabbed my flashlight and told her I was going for a quick walk. She didn't ask questions. I think she thought I just needed some air. The woods were pitch black by then, the kind of black that eats the light whole. I followed the trail I knew by heart, and when I stepped out onto the sand at the edge of the lake, I paused. I didn't know what I was looking for. I just knew I needed to see something, anything. I scanned the flashlight across the surface of the water. Everything looked normal, peaceful even. The night was still. Not even the frogs were croaking. And then, splash, a heavy one. Something large had emerged from the water, not fallen into it. I jerked the flashlight toward the sound, hand trembling, the beam jittering across the ripples. And that's when I saw it. Standing waist deep in the water was a figure, a person, at least in shape. Its body was thin, long, human-like, but its face was completely covered by long, black, soaking hair. I couldn't see its eyes, or whether it even had eyes. It didn't move. It didn't breathe. It just stood there, turned toward me, but not quite looking at me. I dropped the flashlight. Didn't mean to. It just slipped right out of my hand when the panic overtook me. I didn't pick it up. I ran. I ran harder than I have in my entire life. Through the trees, across the dirt, not looking back even once. My chest burned. My ears were ringing. When I reached the house, I slammed the door shut behind me and locked it. Every deadbolt, every latch. I haven't told anyone. Not my wife, not my kids, not anyone. But what keeps me up at night is the thought I can't shake. That lake is only a quarter mile from my house, and I don't know if that thing ever went back in. For all I know, it could be in the woods. It could be watching. It could be watching me right now, through the window behind me, as I write this.